Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to this week's version of our 10-minute discussion together. Before we get started, I want to fill you in on all the latest and greatest that's happening with us. So first up, this past week we had a book review that I posted. It was Justo Gonzalez's Teach Us to Pray. If you haven't checked out the review on this book yet, please make sure you do that right away. This is an amazing book talking about how the Lord's Prayer is not just some prayer that we prayed as we memorized as a child, but this is a call to action. So if you're interested in seeing more about social justice and how to connect with your faith in an impacting way, this book is for you. Upcoming this Friday, you will see what our next book is that I'll be reviewing, and I'll give you a little hint right now. I've been reading Emotionally Healthy Discipleship along with a number of other books lately, and I'm really leaning towards this one, but Friday you'll see the full details on which one is coming in 2 weeks. As another update for you, my typesetting is now complete. It happened so fast, and so I am doing the final submissions this week, and pretty soon we'll get to see my book, and I'm so excited about it. Now, speaking of exciting things, last week together we had the opportunity to do our 10-minute discussion in a little different format. We took it on the road, if you will, and did time in our communities living out Hope Has Hands and Feet, which was our discussion topic for last week. Now, I shared briefly in the video that I had pre-recorded that last Wednesday night I would have the opportunity to go and enjoy a meal with friends and take Hope into their home. And so I'd love to hear how you were Hope with hands and feet last week and even into this week. So if you have a story, I'd love to hear it. You can either share it posted on this, or you can private message me. I'd just love to hear how you've been able to share hope with someone else in the last week or so. This week we're diving into the idea of commitment and how it can be a real catalyst for change in our lives. So often we see big insurmountable challenges, things that we just can't overcome, or habits that we just can't break, and we look at them like it's never going to happen. And so we find ourselves struggling to even try to break these things in our lives that have become so normal to us. So what does it look like to have commitment that can really lead to change? And now, before we dive into this discussion together, I just want to share, for those of you who are struggling with addictions, I am not just here to gaslight you. There is a real hope for change in your lives too. And I'm not saying that you are not committed enough to see those changes happen. It happens at different paces and different times for every single person. So if you are someone who is struggling with addiction, please reach out to others and find help. And make sure that you are not trying to do this on your own, because along with commitment, there has to be the dedication of yourself and your community towards change. And so surround yourself with people who can help carry you through the commitment you want to make. And so that aside, let's dive into what this looks like into some other practical areas of our lives. Before we do, I just want to focus on the scripture that we used for this sermon, which has really shaped so much how I look at how I commit to things and how I seek change in my life. And so we'll be reading from Ezra chapter 7, and I'll be just reading verse 6 through 10 quickly. This Ezra went up from Babylonia. He was a scribe skilled in the law of Moses that the Lord, the God of Israel, had given. And the king granted him all that he asked for the hand of the Lord, his God, was upon him. Some of the people of Israel and some of the priests and Levites, the singers and the gatekeepers and the temple servants also went up to Jerusalem in the 7th year of King Artaxerxes. They came to Jerusalem in the 5th month, which was in the 7th year of the king. And on the day of the 1st month, the journey up from Babylon was begun. And on the 1st day of the 5th month, he came to Jerusalem, for the gracious hand of his God was upon him. For Ezra had set his heart to study the law of the Lord and to do it, and to teach the statutes and ordinances in Israel. You know, we often think about faith life as something that we just need to pray more. We just need to do more. We just need to dive in and dig in a little bit more. And I've heard that my whole life. Look, I grew up as a pastor's kid. I grew up in the church. I was raised on the flannel graphs. I get that. But it's not all about just digging in. It has to be meaningful commitment, because we can sign up for 100,000 things and we can fill our schedule so full to the brim. Trust me, my son is only 2 years old and we keep getting these ridiculous emails for tumblebugs and all these other amazing programs that are out there that we could be putting him into. But we can fill our schedules to the brim without having any meaningful commitment. See, one thing we didn't talk about in this sermon is, what does meaningful commitment look like? What does it look like to make a meaningful change based on a meaningful commitment? Are we struggling to commit ourselves to something because we've got all of these other loose, unimportant connections and commitments in our lives that we have to do, which prevent us from actually solidly committing to something? Let's put this in context here. Imagine you find yourselves dedicated to an academic degree. You really want to pursue this degree so that you can become someone. But then when you get to the college, there's all these programs and all these things that you can take as extras and little moments that suddenly you find yourself signing up to all of them because they're all amazing opportunities to learn from. But then you have no time for any of them to be done well. That's where I found myself in my third year at Kingswood. I had signed up for so many things that I was suddenly just overwhelmed by the amount of stuff I had to do, and I couldn't take in any of what I was learning, which meant I wasn't actually able to retain and make that important change in my understanding of the world around me, which would lead to that change in how I would practice life, because it wasn't a possibility with the amount of commitments I was making that didn't really mean anything. So what does this look like in our lives? Obviously, we need to work. Obviously, we need to make commitments to our families. But how do we know when to make those commitments and when not to? Something that my husband always talks about is having a vision and having a very clear goal for where you want to be and how you want to be and all of that. He talks about this a lot with churches and understanding where we as a church want to be, because as a church, there's a lot of different people coming in with a lot of different voices, and we want to be unified with one another. But as an individual, it's also important, because there are many parts to every person. And if we listen to all the little parts, we might end up scattered to the wind as an individual. But it doesn't have to be that way. Think about who you want to be in this world and how you want to help see the world change and grow and transform, and consider what that looks like for you. And as you make a commitment, consider, does this commitment fall in line with what it is that I want to be in this world? Does this commitment fall in line with who I want to be in this world and how I want to see this world changed? And if it doesn't, it's okay to say no. Let yourself say no to commitments that are meaningless. Commit your full self to things that are meaningful and powerful and have the potential to make a change, just as Ezra in chapter 7 paid a meaningful commitment to set his heart to study the law of the Lord and to do it, and to teach the statutes and ordinances in Israel. He wasn't just learning and doing these things because it was a fancy thing to do. He was doing them because he knew they had the potential to make a meaningful change. It was a meaningful commitment that made a meaningful change. And as a result, there were blessings that fell on them. And I don't want to get into the whole blessing culture right now, but here's what we need to know. When we make a meaningful commitment, a meaningful change will happen. Because when we are committed to something, God will help us see it through. And so consider what it is you're committed to, and consider, are these things that will help me grow, or are these things that will just become an obstacle? I want to thank you for joining me for this 10-minute discussion this week. Next week, we are going to start a new series, so keep your eyes peeled for that as well. On Friday, we will be announcing the book review. I think Friday is when we will also be announcing what the next series is, so keep your eyes open and alert for that. They're coming Friday. Thank you again, and we will see you next week on our next 10-minute discussion. God bless, guys.